Freeman, is that you?
Yes, it is.
You are a legend. I'm privileged to speak to you.
Oh, thank you.
This is thrilling. I've watched a lot of your videos. You are just on the cutting forefront of waking up society.
Oh,
Uh,
man.
it,
Thank you.
it's an honor.
Beaming out across the galaxy, this is where conspiracy on the wild side meets the perspective of a lifetime. This is the Free Zone with your host, Freeman.
Hello, and welcome to the Free Zone. Well, guys, just a quick update on the great YouTube purge. Yes, channels on YouTube are going down left and right. It seems if you mention crisis actors, false flags, or Pizzagate, your channel will be deleted from YouTube. Many have gone down. InfoWars, Richie Allen, Richie from Boston, many others. Already gone, and rebuilding their YouTube channels. Freeman TV YouTube channel, one more strike, guys. I have 2 strikes. Now, these come retroactively. These are shows that are years old that suddenly they put into action these new community guidelines, and boom. Freeman TV YouTube channel has 2 strikes, and it's waiting on its 3rd. Now, to be honest with you, I went and I deleted any video that I thought would get a strike from the community guidelines. I mean, for me, YouTube is not my place. Right? I have 100 and some thousand of you there listening on YouTube, but freemantv.com is the place to get everything uncensored and free, or straight to you without any hassles. So freemantv.com is the place you want to go. What you need to realize at this moment is that Big Brother is putting the responsibility of keeping independent media going into your hands. You see, it's sponsors that are causing all of these problems. Sponsors are what keep me from getting on the bigger shows. Sponsors are what have demoted my videos, and now community guidelines from sponsors is the reason they are deleting channels. And Freeman TV YouTube channel is so close. One more strike, and I don't know what one will bring it and which one won't. So this puts sponsorship of independent, I can't seem to get that word out today. This puts sponsorship of independent media into your hands. It's now you guys or no one, because it's going to go. And we won't make anything from YouTube. We won't make everything. I'm blocked from Facebook. I'm blocked from everywhere. So I hope that you will follow me on Twitter, at Freeman TV, to get all the news stories and thoughts and theories and everything. I tweet daily, and I tweet for you, because this is my last bastion of social media is Twitter. And I hope you all will actually come to freemantv.com and listen to the programs and look around to see all the data that's there. Because, I could be off YouTube tomorrow. I don't know. But tonight, folks, we are taking a fascinating voyage through the psychotic mind and into the presence of another world which constantly surrounds and affects us. Tonight we are talking with Jerry Marzinsky. He's a clinical psychiatrist that has worked in prisons and asylums for 35 years. He's gotten deep into understanding what the voices are telling schizophrenics. But just like many of us, he was unable to tell any of his family, friends, or peers what he was learning from these psychotic voices. So please welcome to the Free Zone the amazing Jerry Marzinsky. Welcome, Jerry.
Well, I'm very glad to be here and speak with you. I want to make one correction. I'm not a clinical psychiatrist. I'm a licensed psychotherapist.
That
I
is
do
the
have,
difference, yes.
Yeah. I've got 35 years of experience working on the front lines of mental health, including 7 in the largest state hospital in the world with the criminally insane. I got about 16 years working in the prison, 10 years working crisis in hospital ERs and various mental health centers.
You have a resume that I couldn't read. I mean, the list of universities, the PhDs, the hospitals, the prisons, the asylums, you have been deep into this situation. Now, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a totally different world that most people don't even suspect exists.
I want to share a story with you, Jerry. I went on a trip on my school bus in 2012, and for some reason, when we were in the Northeast, everyone around here wanted to take me to a haunted something or another. It seems there are so many ghosts here in the Northeast from the Civil War and the Revolutionary War that this is the most haunted place around here. And one of these places was a haunted asylum. And as we were wandering through, the host that was showing us around started talking about Abraham Lincoln's father-in-law, Robert Smith Todd. Now, Robert Smith Todd, Abraham Lincoln's father-in-law, was a financier, a banker. He was known for these things. But for some reason, and I could not find any evidence of this on the internet when I was doing kind of a cursory inspection to find more, I couldn't find any story on Robert Smith Todd service in psychiatry or psychology or any of it, and yet here was this story of Abraham Lincoln's father-in-law in this creepy asylum. Now, you sent me some pictures of the places you've worked, and I mean, these places they're just creepy. And I'm going to include your pictures, and if I can find them, the pictures of this asylum in the post. But they told us that he took great pleasure, Mr. Todd, in using torturous binding techniques that would chain their neck to their arms, to back to their feet, to the point where they had to roll these patients around the asylum on these contortion devices. And then out back, they had a big spring-loaded noose that would just launch the person up in the air, breaking their neck. And this was the place that they came to help people. This is, I mean, just go ahead right there, Jerry. I mean, this is what doctors are doing to try and help these people. This is insane.
Well, yeah, I checked into the history of Central State Hospital, which at the time I was there, probably had 8,000 patients, but in the 50s it was up to 13,000. It sprawls over 2,000 acres and was taking people in well before the Civil War. And back in the early days, I mean, psychiatry didn't know what this stuff was all about. A lot of these guys, the most violent, were chained to the walls or chained to wagons. When they were brought to the hospital, they found that if they were treated with kindness, that they weren't anywhere near as violent. So the early days of the hospital, the director, Dr. Powell, would resist chaining these guys up as much as possible. And I think Carl Jung found the same thing out, that if they're treated with kindness, they get better. But they didn't have any drugs back then. So, a lot the violent ones, they chained up. And then they started with insulin shock. They had this population which was growing, and before the days of large-scale tranquilizers, antipsychotics, they were using stuff like insulin shock or hot and cold water, dipping them in hot and cold water. They didn't know what caused these things, why they were this way. And then straitjackets. I used to own a couple of those. I mean, they'd wrestle these guys into straitjackets and they would hold them there until they were totally exhausted. There were these huge battles between the attendants and the patients. And both sides got hurt. Bones were broken, noses were broken on both sides. And then when they started with the shock treatments, oh man, there were at Central State there were 3,000 shock treatments being given a year, and they would basically stun the brains of these guys, and those shock treatments were, more often used as punishment for misbehavior than anything else.
Right.
And after running this electricity through their brains, they were like stunned for a long period of time. Right after I got there, I got a call from one of my cohorts he was having a shock treatment demonstration at his psychiatric unit. I'd never seen one before. And he goes, "You want to come?" So, I shot over there. I'm like, wow, shock treatment. I get to see one of these things, because they were just legend before that. So I'm standing there, and here's this Cuban psychiatrist with a bunch of students around him, lecturing. And then they brought in this very frail old lady who was, very depressed. And she was apparently trained. I mean, she'd get on this gurney, and here's this shock machine there, in a wooden box, and here's the doctor holding up these two electrodes, were about 2 inches by 2 inches. And he's going, "This is what we use to administer electricity through their brain." And he said it's good for temporary treatment of psychosis and intractable depressions, and he's lecturing on and on. So here's these two nurses bring this little frail old lady in, and they strap her down. They four-point her very tight, and the doctor's putting on these electrodes on each side of her head. He puts gel underneath the electrodes and then kind of straps those on. So I'm watching all this, and then he gets the biggest horse needle I've ever seen, and it's full of this white fluid, and he keeps jabbing her with it, trying to find the vein. I mean, and this thing must have held 2 or 3 ounces of this white milky fluid. And then he starts not just injecting her with it, but he starts sucking blood into that tube and then pushing it back, sucking it back, and then he slowly pushes it in. And I said, well, what's that for? And he goes, "Well, that's a major tranquilizer. I mean, if we didn't give her the tranquilizer, once she got hit by the shock, when she convulses, she'd break her bones." And I'm like, "What? She can break her bones due to the shock?" I'm like standing there watching this, like, holy, he pushes this whole big thing of fluid into her vein, and then he tells everybody to step back, and he flips the switch on this box, and boom, and she just starts convulsing and just writhing and straining against those restraints, and I'm looking at this like horrified. I mean, here's this poor little old lady, and she's just convulsing there, and while this guy's lecturing on and on, it's like, oh, this is a convulsion, like it's nothing, and I'm like shocked, I'm like horrified, and I'm like, well, when's he going to turn that damn thing off? And then finally he switches it off. And he continues lecturing to the students, and like nothing. And I'm looking at her, and she's turning purple. She's turning cyanotic. And I'm like horrified. And I go, hey man, she's dying. She's turning cyanotic. And, almost as an afterthought, he looks down, and she's purple. And he goes, oh. So he gets the paddles, the heart paddles, and he shocks her again. Mm-hmm. And she comes to life. And I'm like, holy cow. And I'm looking around at all the other people, and they're just like looking like, oh, well, so that's how it's done. And I'm like reeling, and I go to walk out, and I started to faint. I mean, I hung on to this pillar, and I was about to go down. I mean, nothing I've ever seen in my entire life has caused a reaction like that. And they were doing this 3,000 times a year. Mm.
Yeah, you're left wondering if the inmates are running the asylum. I mean,
well, I don't know. I mean, and then they start with the antipsychotic drugs. I mean, basically what those things are just major tranquilizers, and they make they change the person's personality, and
right.
And they're just like mind numbing. They're just, they're awful. I mean, they're awful.
Now
but they had.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh.
You said the one.
Yeah,
the one?
I mean, the one thing that they're not doing, which was the big difference that you did, was step back and start to actually listen to what these schizophrenic patients were saying.
Oh no, that was forbidden. I got in trouble for that. I don't know how many times, because I was listening to what they had to say about the voices. And I got pulled up like in different units 2 or 3 times in front of the psychiatrist and directly ordered not to ask psychotic patients about their voices or what the voices were telling them, because I was reinforcing their hallucinations and making them worse. But here I'm being ordered to ignore their voices. But if the psychiatrist found out the voices were telling them to kill themselves or to kill somebody else, the psychiatrist acted like somebody stuck a hot stick on their butt. They'd jump up, they'd lock these guys up, they'd fill them full of drugs, and they would just, turn them into a zombie. So ignore the voices unless they're telling the patient to kill somebody or somebody else. And in that case, they're real. But otherwise, they're hallucinations. And,
right.
It's like, oh, my God,
Well, we've got a story like John Nash that was made into the film A Beautiful Mind. Just to kind of give us an understanding of what this is like. The story of John Nash, at least, is famous, and you've got this guy who thinks he has a bunch of friends. He has a group of people that he talks to daily, and then suddenly finds out that they're all in his head. I mean, this is amazing and disturbing.
Well, most of what I took an interest in was, there are many different forms of schizophrenia, and one of the most prominent is paranoid schizophrenia, and that's where the patient hears these voices, and they range all the way from the kind of stuff we hear, like, oh, you're a screw up, you're worthless, all the way up to just horrifying. I mean, just absolutely horrifying things. It's another world. And when psychiatry, so here are these guys hearing these voices. They, about a third of them feel they are real and they are demons. And I've asked them, because after questioning virtually all the staff I had access to at the state hospital as to what they thought these voices were and how they operated, all of them said, well, they're hallucinations. They're due to a chemical brain imbalance in the brain. I wasn't getting anywhere. They were all of the same opinion. They were all programmed in the same way, in the same place. And they had no interest in what these voices were telling these people, unless they're telling them to kill themselves.
And they really were, academic bias, and you're in that classroom. You don't get to have any examples or see or do any experimentation. You've just got this basically a priestcraft in front of you telling you what is and what isn't. And I mean, I know you, Jerry, you would throw a question at these people and it disturbed their entire world, I'm sure, while you were still in the university.
Oh man, I got in trouble so many times for that, and nowhere in as much trouble as I did in the PhD program. One of the things, I was raised not to trust authority, period. I mean, from the time I was a small kid. So here you go. I got my undergraduate psych degree at Temple University, and here I'm sitting there, and just like you say, they're presenting you all this information, and they're telling you that this is the truth, and that you must believe it. But the only place you could have, the only section of psychology where you could verify that was experimental psychology, where you could go into a rat lab and you could see these different behavioral scenarios that come about when under certain conditions. But all the rest, clinical psych and all these other psych areas, there was you had no way to check this out. You had to take their word for it. And I didn't like that, and there were several instances where I went, this just doesn't make sense. And that was before I knew anything really. And there were two in particular that stuck in mind. Is one, we were giving this reading assignment in abnormal psych, and here's a psychologist writing, if two psychotic guys with the same delusion were to meet each other, and one of them would have to give up their delusion and take another one. And I'm like, why would that have to happen? You got two crazy guys. They're both crazy. Why would one of them have to give up their delusion and pick up another delusion because somebody else is in their area with the same delusion? But I had, no undergraduate psych had access to any kind of clinical population. But that struck me as so bizarre, I logged it back in my head. And, several years later when I was working at Central State Hospital, I was doing my rounds, and on the second floor of one of the psychiatric units, I saw a new patient. And he was walking around talking to himself, and I hadn't seen him before, so I went to size him up and see what I had on my hands. And I said, "Hey, guy, what's your name?" And I could hear him talking to himself before I got there, so I knew he was hearing voices. And he said, "I'm Jesus Christ." And I went, "You are?" I said, "Wait a minute. No, you can't be Jesus Christ because I am." And I'm like, okay, what's he going to do? So I'm standing there watching, and he looked perplexed. And then he looks up and he goes, "Okay, we can both be Jesus Christ." And he walks off. Completely flew in the face of what this clinical psychologist was writing. And I'm like, well, okay, if that's bull crap, what other bull crap are they up to here? And there was another one came up. Now, one of the things they taught us about schizophrenics in both graduate and undergraduate school is that they're so disorganized that they can't plan detailed, they can't make detailed plans and carry them out. They're just too disorganized, they're too messed up. So, one day I was over Ed's psych, and I had friends that worked at, that I graduated with that worked at different psych units. And I was over Ed's unit one day, and I saw this. Central State didn't have the highest quality psychiatrists around. They were kind of like the bottom of the bucket. And there was this one guy over in Ed's unit who dressed like Sigmund Freud, had a beard and mustache like Sigmund Freud, acted like Sigmund Freud, smoked a pipe like Sigmund Freud. He was one of the psychiatrists over there. And Ed showed me, he goes, "Yeah, look at this guy." I said, "Man, that's bizarre." So one day Ed calls me up and he goes, "You got to come over here real quick. You got to see this." So I ran over his unit, and he took me into this guy's Sigmund Freud's office, and I couldn't believe what I saw. One of his patients, a schizophrenic, a psychotic guy, who hated this guy. Completely psychotic. He was up on the third floor. He had made it at like 3 a.m. Somehow he made it past 3 attendance stations onto the first floor where this guy's office was. He broke into his office. He got up on his desk, in the middle of his desk, and he took a crap and he shaped it into a pipe like this guy smoked. And then he escaped from the hospital and they never caught him. Now, you talk about planning. How did this guy get past 3 attendance stations and break into this guy's office and then somehow get out of the hospital without being caught? And he's psychotic as a bedbug.
Well, what you discovered was that these voices were actually helping in these petty crimes, that these voices may have an agenda.
Oh, they definitely got an agenda. Yeah, we're well off my my thing here, but yeah,
off the outline. Let's take it step by step because I want the audience to understand this situation. So here we have you going through the entire university system, not being able to question anything. You've been led to believe things that you proved to be false. Now you've gotten yourself into a state hospital where you still can explore, but not so much. And you're going to start moving yourself into a position where you get to explore this a little bit more. So yeah, please keep us on track here.
Okay. Yeah. One more thing to add to the educational thing. One of the things I wanted to know the most is where thoughts came from, and what they were, because how can you understand the mind if you don't understand that? And in like 8 years of psychology, even 4 of graduate school, that was never mentioned. So while I was in the PhD program, supposedly one of the best in the world, which I was really, in the country, which I was really disillusioned with, I actually asked the head of, the department one day in a lecture. He said, anybody have any questions? I rose my hand and I said, yeah, where do thoughts come from? And he just looked at me like I was a Martian that had fallen out of a spaceship, and it was like I had red flagged myself,
Such a simple question, but so important. I mean, yeah. I mean,
you don't
yeah.
you don't ask a professor in front of a big group to answer something he has no answer for. So I had really red flagged myself there.
Yeah. But it's a critical importance. I mean, we have a heart that pulses at a beat that we don't know why. We have these thoughts that come in our heads that are mostly negative. When you start to analyze the 50,000 thoughts that go through your head, I would say over half of them, if not more, are negative.
Well, the ones where these entities are most noticeable are the ones where you're just walking down the street and all of a sudden this horrible, horrible thought barges into your mind. I mean, something that's so horrible, you're shocked you even thought it. You know it's not you. You know it didn't come from you. You know you would never act on something like that, and it just gives you the shivers to even think a thought like that, and you kind of go, where the devil did that come from? That's them. These things are being inserted into your mind. So, I wasn't quite sure what these voices were for a long time. Nobody on the staff knew what they were. They were all hallucinations. They're to be ignored. You don't listen to them. You don't give them any attention, nothing like that. So, when I first got to the Central State Hospital was so big, it was like a small city. I mean, you walk down the street at night, and here's these huge buildings with the windows open in the summer, and you hear these shrieks coming out of these buildings, these ungodly shrieks that were eerie, and it was like, wow, you could feel that something was there that just wasn't right. But in the daytime, I was fascinated because, I was fascinated by abnormal psychology, and in this place, there was everything that could go wrong with the human mind was somewhere in this place. So after the first couple of years of getting to that place, I noticed a handful of oddities that, I just couldn't explain and I didn't understand. One was that, the psychotic patients were acting in very bizarre ways, and they were self-destructive, and it was consistent. And they weren't doing anything good. It was all bad. And one of the first things I encountered like that was fairly bizarre was, as new staff members, one of the psychotic patients had cut off his penis with a razor blade, and they had sewed it back on, and it was the talk of the hospital cafeteria whether it was taking or not. Now, this happened on Ed's unit, and I'm thinking, like, why did he do that? Nobody asked him that. So I asked Ed. I said, Ed, look this guy up and ask him why he did that. Ed came back the next day. I said, we met at lunch. I said, you ask him? He goes, yeah, I asked him. What did he say? He said, I don't need it anymore. Okay. It's like weird. The other thing that was really strange, that was really evident, that I saw happening throughout the hospital, and I couldn't explain why at the time. I know now, but at the time it was perplexing. Psychiatrists who had caseloads of 300 and 400 patients, spending only 15 or 20 minutes a month with psychotic patients, were being attacked at a rate 3 to 5 times higher than all other medical staff or regular doctors. And it was an attack rate that was as high as attendants who spent 8 hours a day with them all day long. So there was something going on there where psychotic patients did not like psychiatrists, and it was only psychiatrists. It wasn't psychiatric nurses. It wasn't psychology people like me. It wasn't attendants. It was just psychiatrists. It made no sense to me at all. Why were they being attacked at such a rate? Which probably made them more gun shy about provoking these people. Because they were the ones being attacked.
Yeah.
Now the other thing that made no sense is that these high-powered tranquilizers were the only thing that they had that would suppress these psychotic voices and kind of even partly bring these guys back to reality. And the patients would consistently stop taking their meds as if they wanted to return back to a psychotic state. Now, that made no sense to me. And it was akin to, the side effects of these meds are awful, but the effect of going floridly to psychotic is, what would be equivalent is you give them a choice, hey, what would you rather have, the flu or would you rather have the bubonic plague? And they would consistently choose the bubonic plague. Yeah, I had no idea why, but it was across the entire hospital. It was happening over and over again, and they'd just be put on their meds, and it was just a big merry-go-round going round and round. They'd be drugged up, they'd go off their meds, they'd put them back on their meds again. It just went over and over and over again. So they weren't curing anything. These meds cured nothing. All they did was kept these guys, sedated and out of trouble. So throughout the hospital, everybody believes that, okay, these voices are caused by a chemical imbalance. But, I'm looking around and I go, okay, if that's true, why aren't psychiatrists ever taking any kind of labs or measurement or any kind of test to see what's out of balance before they start filling these guys with all these different drugs? It never happened. I'm watching this and questioning, like, well, okay, if it's a chemical imbalance, it would seem to treat it, they'd have to know what was out of balance.
Yeah. And I gotta say, Jerry, that a lot of the people that I know, I've known a few psychotics and a few people that just, weren't right. And when they were told that they had a chemical imbalance, it gave them an excuse. And suddenly it was like, well, I have an imbalance, so this is how I am.
Well, these guys, when they start hearing voices, they struggle with what's going on. It's like, they're never told that voices or your thoughts might not be your own. It's just everybody's programmed to be thinking that, okay, if it appears in your mind, it's your thought. It belongs to you. You somehow generated it. But with these awful messages that are coming through to these guys, and they're horrible. I could go into the details, but they start off as just bad, and then they move up into nightmarish states, and they're struggling with, could this be me? What is going on here? And what I was seeing, after I ran out, I didn't get any answers from staff. I would ask the patients themselves, what do you think these things are? About a third of them would say, without a doubt, unequivocally, they're demons. And then they'd look at me like, okay, you're not going to believe me like none of the other staff believe me. And well, I didn't know they acted like demons, but I didn't quite believe in demons. Another third would say, well, I don't know what they are. They're not good, but I don't know what they are. I'm not sure they belong to me. I'm not sure they don't. So they're kind of on the edge. Now, the last third were the ones that fell into the believing the psychiatrist. Your brain is broken. It'll be broken forever. There's nothing we know how to do to fix it. You're going to have to take these mind-numbing meds for the rest of your life. What you're hearing are hallucinations. They're not real, and there's nothing you can do about it. That is such a awful, debilitating, helpless message. It's like, all you can do is take these awful drugs. That's all there is. There's no cure. Where if the guys who believe they're demons, that's something different from who they are. now they have an enemy that is not themselves. It's something that's attacking them. They don't know what it is. They don't know how it works. It's in there, but they see it as different from themselves. It is not who they are. So here's a struggle between these voices that are trying to grab more and more control and power, and the person who's in there kind of trying to fight him off, not knowing how. But when they're told, you're broken, psychiatry is telling them, yeah, those voices are you. Your mind is broken. There's nothing you can do about it. There is no enemy you can fight. All you can do is take these toxic drugs. That's all you can do. Now, those drugs cure nothing. They rot out their peripheral nervous systems, eventually causing something called extrapyramidal syndrome, which is this uncontrollable shaking that if it keeps going, it becomes permanent. So you see these patients walking all through the hospital that are just quivering and shaking, and they call it the Thorazine shuffle. They're burned out from taking years and years of these antipsychotic medications, and now they can barely walk. But of course, psychiatry has something for that too. Cogentin. We'll just give them some cogentin, and that'll mask those symptoms also. We'll give them the antipsychotics to mask the psychotic symptoms. They don't go anywhere. They just mask them. And then when the physical symptoms start going, we'll give them something else to mask that. All the while, these destructive processes are going on underneath the medications.
Meanwhile, you're discovering that there might be some supernatural power to these voices, as they seem to be prescient, seem to be able to give knowledge to the psychotic without, Well, I would love it if you'd share some of the stories of what these voices are telling these people to do.
Oh, boy. Yeah, I could give you a brief rundown of that. Like I said, they kind of start off, and what they want you to do is believe that what you're hearing is you. And I've had several patients who would just, out and out ask them, who are you? What are you? And the voices would respond back, we're you. That's what they want. So then it's one of the things I first noticed when I started asking patients at the hospital about their voices. And now this was very difficult because there is no positive outcome for these patients to talk about those voices. They've been locked up, they've been drugged, their families have brought them to psychiatrists, their friends have abandoned them. There is no positive outcome to speak about these voices. And years later, I found out the voices themselves were demanding that they not speak about them. And I don't know how many times where I was questioning a patient while I was working in the prison, where the voices would come out and tell the patient, don't tell him anymore. He already knows too much. Shut up. And they would report that to me. And that happened over and over and over again. But one thing I saw is that these voices were consistently, unswervingly negative, destructive, derogatory, insulting. They would start off with telling the patient, you're no good. You're worthless. Nobody cares about you. Your friends are faking like they like you. Your family is faking like they like you. You're worthless. You never can get anything done. On Sherry's website, we have the 3 or 4 pages of what these things say. And then it moves up into darker areas where, attack this person. Or this guy's trying to kill you, so you need to kill him first. And, these people can become supernaturally strong. And in the prison, the gangsters would take the antipsychotic medications away from these psychotic guys, and then they would say, hey, that guy over in the other gang he's going to kill you. You better get him first. And these guys were like psychotic torpedoes, and they go attack these guys, and then they get locked up and full of drugs again. So the prisons today have become the state hospitals. So when the state hospitals emptied out, they said, oh yeah, we're going to put a mental health system in place. Yeah, they did, and then they defunded it. So now the mental health system in the U.S. is in shambles. It's a mess. All these guys are going to prison. So here you have all these psychotic guys in prison. Half of them don't get medications. They're being whipped up into a frenzy, and after 5 or 10 years, they're more psychotic than they ever were. And then they release them onto the streets with 2 weeks worth of medicine and say, "Hey, if the voices come back, go back to the nearest emergency room." So psychotic. Right. It's sickening what's going on.
And I've seen that. I saw a mass exodus, and they're all on those city buses. And
yes.
Yeah, you have no idea.
Yeah. So they're telling them all kinds of horrible things. But after it took like 2 or 3 years to break through how to get these people to trust me, where they will talk about their voices. And what I did, how that happened was by bit, as I learned something new that other staff didn't know about the voices, I would start off with, "Hey, you're hearing voices," something like that. And they go, "Yeah, I'm hearing them." "Yeah, they're a bunch of assholes, aren't they?" And the guy'd look up like, that statement alone covered a lot of ground. It's like, yeah, they weren't good. They aren't good. They're assholes. You're not denying and saying they're hallucinations. So that would get their attention. And then, you add other stuff like, they get you about 2 or 3 in the morning a lot of times, don't they? They're like, "Yeah, how'd you know that?" And
that is amazing right there. Just the ability to apply what one schizophrenic is saying to the life of the experience of another one. I mean, this is already showing some cohesiveness from these voices.
Well, what was kind of blew me away is after 7 years at the state hospital and studying as much as I could. I mean, and in those 7 years, I learned relatively little compared to what I learned at the state prison, because at the state hospital, the underlying rule was you don't upset psychotic inmates. You don't upset them. And what I found is when I started questioning them about their voices, they would become upset. I didn't know why, but they didn't like to be asked about their voices. So, I'd been in trouble there several times for asking questions about the voices they were hearing, and I was having to walk on eggshells. So I would only glean, a thing or two at a time. But then the next psychotic I worked with, I go, well, okay, I know this about them. They're awful. They hit you at night. They never say anything good. And you just keep adding bit by bit, and then they see you're trying to understand what's happening to them, and they will begin talking to you and opening up a little more. And the more I knew, the more they opened up, and the quicker. But in the early days, in those first 7 years, I didn't know a whole lot. So it was very slow going. But by the time I got to when I got to the state prison, everything was different. So the bottom underlying rule in the state hospital was you don't upset psychotic patients no matter what. You don't do anything to upset them. We're understaffed. They're attacking psychiatry at a horrendous rate. If you upset them, the psychiatrist is going to have to deal with them, and psychiatrists are being beat up by these guys. We don't know why. So don't upset them. Don't do anything. Now in the prison, it's a different story. I mean, the whole underlying thing there is, well, inmates are liars. You can't trust any of them. They're all a bunch of whiners. They're, they, the upsetting an inmate by asking them up. Well, yeah, they're criminals. They're less than human. I mean, and that's kind of what they teach them in the, in the entrance when you first get on. They give you this, introductory kind of thing, and
how
they're
to not act like a human, right?
Yeah. These guys aren't human, so so the kind of stuff where a patient at the state hospital would get upset over, being questions about the voices, here,
go unnoticed. Yeah.
yeah, here in the state prison, I mean, you could have them, the voices go off and start screaming at you and and cursing you, that kind of stuff, and that doesn't even break the, the ambient noise level. I mean, that doesn't,
Right.
that doesn't even come close to, and then,
Now you've got kind of an open laboratory.
Oh,
You
boy.
get to actually
I got-
delve into all these mysteries that you've been
unre-
skirting along.
unrestricted,
Yeah.
but I still know what psychiatry would do if they caught me doing that.
Yeah, just like YouTube.
Yeah,
They're going to delete you.
they're going to delete me. So, the more, what I did when I got there is surrounded myself with inmates who wanted to get rid of the voices and were willing to tell me real time everything that they were telling them, and turn that over to me. Now, that was rare, very few, especially in the prison. I mean, you could see why. I mean, if you're an inmate and you're telling the psych that the voices are telling you to kill somebody, that's a very unnerving situation when that psych could have you locked down and you wouldn't see the light of day and drugged senseless, for months. That you could see where they wouldn't trust you. So, I formulated a relationship with these guys and gave them, kind of, hey, I know this about the voices. I'm not sure they're hallucinations. I don't know what they are. I'm trying to find out. I want your help. Now, I'll make a deal with you. You can tell me anything, and I will not sick the guards on you or the psychiatrist unless you act on it. If I feel that you're about to act on it, you're about to hurt yourself or somebody else, and you can't convince me otherwise, I'm going to have to take action. But otherwise, you can tell me whatever you want, whatever these things are telling you, and I'll do what I can to help you out, and I won't turn you into the authorities. So, they started testing me out, and they saw in a lot of cases that, where a normal average psych would turn them in and have them drugged, I would not, but I'd keep a close eye on them. And I'd also could adjust my schedule of seeing them. And with this group, there was a group of about 10 of them that would do this. And the rest, they were very suspicious. And I always had a group of about 10 or 15 that would tell me what these things were saying. And, you could see where they wouldn't want to talk about it because, these things are telling them horrible, embarrassing things to do.
Now, the ones that shocked me were the ones that were telling stories that were telling these people what to do as if they had omniscient powers.
Well, I think some of them did. Now, that came kind of later on. When I was working, there was one guy who actually, he recovered. I mean, he came inside. I was working with him 6 months or, maybe 3/4 of a year. And what we would do is I saw that these voices were telling them to do all these horrible things that would get them in trouble, and they would call them names and tell them lies. And so as they told me what these voices were telling them, I would debunk the voices, and say, well, that's a lie. You're not like that. If you attack this guy, you're going to get locked down. Don't be messing with these drug guys. So what I would do is kind of short circuit what the voices were telling them. And I would make my office available to them where if they felt like they were losing control, I would get them in as soon as possible and work with them. And, give them homework assignments and kind of try to turn them more onto a positive spiritual path by giving them not necessarily religious material, but spiritual positive material.
What's shocking here, Jerry, is that you're the only person doing this.
Well, I found out later there was one exorcist on the unit, but I didn't know that for years. But yeah, I was the only one doing it because
I
everybody
mean,
else believed they
sitting
were
down,
hallucinating.
actually listening, actually getting the stories, it's amazing to me that it's taken this long to have a fascinated mind like yours come in and start to actually dig in. I can't believe it's not the norm and that you had to do this all in secret. It's just astounding.
Oh yeah, yeah. I couldn't let this out. I could not let this out. So what started happening is these men I was working with were getting better. You know, the more we could debunk the voices, the more we could reduce their power, the more we could, say they're liars, and just kind of interfere with what they were doing. You know, the better these guys were getting. They had more energy. They were able to work in their classes better. Um, the voices came less and they were stronger. And then a strange thing started happening all at about the same time. They were coming into me one by one at different times and saying, the voices are really getting pissed off with you. And I'm like, what? Yeah, they're really getting pissed off with you. They're telling me to, attack you. They're telling me not to come in for meetings. They're telling me you're full of crap, not to listen to anything you have to say. You're crazy. Leave the office. Don't come back here. Go tell somebody about what you're doing. I mean, they're telling me, and before when I get up in the morning, I know I have an appointment with you. They said, do not go. They give me headaches, and here all of them are reporting these same kind of things. So here's, 10 different inmates, a lot of whom don't even know each other, all reporting the same thing, in response to doing things that are weakening the voices and short-circuiting them. And I'm like, this is weird, it's getting personal. And I'm like, and I'm still, even though a third of them are telling me these things are demons, I'm still not quite buying that. What I saw was that virtually all these guys, all these schizophrenic people, were badly physically, sexually, emotionally abused or went through some kind of horrible trauma that warped their psyche and turned it negative and fearful. And it wasn't, a lot of times it just didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, they had this horrible background. And I was thinking, well, something within their subconscious changed, and that their subconscious was now dangerously bruised, and since they were programmed this way, the subconscious is kind of telling them to keep doing the same things and stay in trouble because that's who they were. They were somebody who was in trouble and always going to be in trouble, and they were worthless, and So I was thinking, but the more of these guys who came and spoke to me, the thinner that theory got, and it was in shambles. But I still was not willing to let go of it. And then one guy that I was working with extensively, who was doing real well, as he left the office one day, he turned around in the office and he looked at me and he goes, you know what you're doing is dangerous, don't you? And I just kind of looked at him like I hadn't thought about it. I was thinking, well, whatever these things are, they're stuck in the head of these patients and they can't come out, and I'd never been hit by them. I mean, they've told them to attack me. They've told them to, tear my office up. They told them to do all kinds of awful stuff, but it was always the voices trying to get them to behave in a way that would harm me. But I never saw one come out or do anything or anything fly around the office or anything like that. So when he said that, I was like, whoa, But that, it kind of took me off guard, but it didn't stop me,
So the danger, was it that these entities might leave them and come to you? Or was it just the threat of getting them riled up in a closed office?
Well, I didn't know. I was so taken back by, the guy was about to walk out of my office, he's heading out, and then like as an afterthought, he turns around, looks me straight in the eye, after we'd spent an hour working together to, kind of short circuit these things, he looks at me right in the eye and he goes, you know what you're doing is dangerous, don't you? And I just kind of looked at him, and I was so kind of taken off guard, I didn't even have a response. And then he turns around and he walks out. And I'm like, whoa, where'd that come from? So, I just kept going, working with these guys, and the same thing was happening when they were getting better, And then one day, the same guy comes back, he wasn't scheduled for appointment. He knocks on my office door, and I look at him like, hey, man, what's going on? He goes, I got to talk to you. So he walks in, and I say, sit down. He goes, the voices want to speak to you. I'm like, they want to speak to me personally? And he goes, yeah, they want to talk to you directly. That had never happened before. In whatever it was, 15, 20 years, that had never happened before. It was always the voices would call me names and say things for the patient to tell me, and then I would tell the patient, well, tell them to go to hell, they're a bunch of creeps, or I didn't know what they were, just, get out of my face. And, the patient would always be the interpreter. They were always the go-between. I never had a direct conversation with these things. So, I'm like looking at this guy, and I'm like, what? They want to talk to me directly. He goes, yeah. And I'm kind of like taken aback, and I go, well, what do they have to say? And he looks straight at me. His voice changes a little. It gets a little deeper. And these words came out of his mouth. They're still burned into my memory. He said, you have no right to interfere with our way of life. And I'm like, whoa, our way of life, plural? That wasn't the inmate speaking. And as soon as he said those words, he turned to me, he said, that wasn't me, that was them. I didn't say that. They said that. And my denial system just completely shattered. There was no doubt in my mind at that point that these things were entities, that they were not hallucinations at all. They were not subconscious anything. They were not part of the guy's mind. These were separate, destructive, nasty entities. And I could no longer deny that. I could no longer, and this was a whole different ballpark now.
I can't wait. We're gonna dig into that in the second hour. We're gonna look into this most deeply. But I want to give you the opportunity now that we're in the public hour to really leave a message for those in the industry. Lay out for those that are in this industry that probably will never hear the show. But maybe it'll get around to them in some way, shape, or form. The message that you're trying to get to the industry, to the psychologist, and because we've only got a short amount of time left in this first hour, I want to make sure that you get the message out to the right people as to why you're here, Jerry. Why you're here on this show right now, trying to get this word out to people.
Okay, let me see if I can't summarize it very quickly. A big part of it was what you said. Listen to these people. Listen to what the voices are telling them. Don't blow this off as a hallucination. What you will see is that there is a consistent, negative, destructive, nasty, ugly message that these voices are giving these people. They're not random. They're not clinical hallucinations. Clinical hallucinations are all over the place. They're random. They make no sense. They don't follow any pattern. These things follow a very predictable pattern. Matter of fact, I can almost tell you what they're going to say under certain conditions. They are always consistently negative. The question has to be asked is what holds them on that track? They're like a locomotive moving down a single track, and they don't divert from that. What holds them on that track? The next thing they will see is that after these voices attack, these people are drained. They have no energy. And they will tell you this. After the voices hit me, I have no energy. I can't even get out of bed. Now, they have no idea where their energy went, and for years I thought it was because of the anxiety and the paranoia and the fear that these things cause that drain the energy. Then one day when I was working in the jail for the prison, one of the most dangerous units, I spoke to a florid psychotic and somebody the gangsters were doing everything they could to kill. I mean, they'd already stabbed this guy. Nobody could be under as much stress as this guy the gangsters were trying to kill. They'd even moved gangsters into the unit there to try to get him. And, I watched them one after another. I interviewed them back to back. And I watched him walk up the steps. And the guy the gangsters were trying to kill had 10 times more energy. He looked like Superman compared to the psychotic guy, who was drained. And like, no, that my theory's wrong. There's something else is taking their energy. Right? So with the same guy that warned me about, how dangerous these things were, I was led to, right before that, I was led to start reading some books by several different shamans. It was like an intuitive thing where I saw these books and I just picked them up and started reading. They started talking about these entities that matched these voices. And they said these things are draining their energy. Now, I noticed that after the voices attacked, these guys had no energy. They couldn't even get out of bed. They were drained. But I had no idea where it came from. So I brought one of these books in by the shaman, and I brought this one guy in who I'd been working with for almost a year. And I said, listen, this shaman is saying something that seems to make sense, but I'd like your opinion. I'd like to know what you have to say about what he's saying. And he goes, well, okay. So I closed the door and started reading. And as soon as the shaman started talking about how these things were energy parasites stealing the patient's energy, this guy went into a trance, and he was just sitting there staring at me. It was like he froze, and here was this eerie look, and I was like, whoa, what's going on? As soon as I hit the part where they were energy parasites, then all of a sudden this crackling, this electrical crackling started behind my head. And it sounded like an arc welder. It was loud. And it started moving up the wall behind me, up to the ceiling, and then across the ceiling toward the front of the office. And here I am searching for what's causing this. I could see nothing. I could smell nothing. And I was afraid to take my eyes off this guy because I thought he was going to attack me. And I'm glancing between him and where this noise is. And I asked him, I said, do you hear that? And he's just staring at me. He's not saying anything. He's not moving.
He's
it's
another
just
doctor, right?
No. This is another patient.
Okay.
No, I wanted his opinion.
I see.
And I knew he was still hearing voices, but they were greatly weakened. So, and I had no idea what kind of reaction.
Now you're hearing things.
So now I'm hearing things. And here's this crackling that goes all the way to the front of the office. And I'm watching and glancing between him and the thing, because I pushed my chair back against the wall. I was afraid he was going to attack me. And the guard up front in the medical unit was a female. She would be useless. So this crackling starts moving across the ceiling over his head to the left side of the room. And I'm still watching. I could see nothing, but it was loud. It was very loud. And he's still staring at me. And then it starts coming down the wall on my left side. And I'm, like, is he going to attack me? What's going on here? And I'm like freaked out. And then it leaps into this Rubbermaid trash can right next to my left leg. And I looked down there, and it had been cleaned by the inmate porter the night before. There's nothing in there. It's empty except for this loud crackling sound. And I'm like, what the hell? And I'm staring at him. And then the crackling stops, and he slowly gets up, like very stiffly, and he he kind of goes, I need to go. And I'm like, yeah, get the hell out of here, go. Wow. And he walks down the hall, and I'm sitting there absolutely stunned. I'm like, did I just experience that, you know. And I get up after he leaves. I have to make sure he was out of the building. And I look at all the other offices all the way down the hall. They're all locked. There's nobody there. There's nothing there that could have accounted for an electrical crackling that was as loud as an arc welder. And I'm just absolutely shocked. I mean, I didn't know what to make of that at all. I knew it was somehow connected to my question and him, but I wasn't sure what was going on. And I was scared shitless. I mean, I was like, phew. I closed my office. I didn't see anybody the rest of the day, and I just kind of sat there stunned. You know? And I was so afraid. I did not call this inmate back for 2 to 3 months. You know, I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to be locked in the same office with him. And he was doing fairly well at the time I saw him. You know, the last time. After about 3 months, my curiosity got the best of me, and I sent out a pass for the guards to bring him down. You know, put him in the office, sat him down, and we did a little bit of small talk. I was surprised he was in as good a shape as he was. I was expecting, okay, if the voices could do that, they've torn him to ribbons. He's going to be a basket case. He wasn't. You know, he was still in a pretty good shape. He said, I'm still working to minimize the effect the voices have on me. You know. And then I just, after the small talk, I said, did you hear that crackling the last time you were in my office? And he goes, well, yeah, I did, but I'm surprised that you did. And I said, what the hell was that? And he goes, that was them. You mean the voices? And he goes, yeah, that was the voices. You know, and that was another shock, because I didn't think they could come out of the head of whoever they were infesting and affect other aspects of physical reality. So here's a whole different dimension. You know, like if they can do this, what else can they do? You know, so yeah. I'm like sitting there like, you know, and you know,
we're gonna have to dig deeper into this. I want to know more. We're running out of time in the first hour here. I'm sure we're even over.
Give me 30 more seconds to finish this.
Oh, my apologies. Okay, please do.
So he said, well, that was them. I said, what were they trying to do? He said, they were trying to scare you. And I said, they did a damn good job. And then I asked him, I said, what were they telling you as you left my office that day? He said, they were telling me to go get a shank and come back and stick it in your gut. And I'm like, well, why didn't you do that? He turned around, he looked at me, he goes, I couldn't find one.
Oh man, what a job you have, Jerry. Like,
well, that wasn't the job that most people in my position did. I mean, I had entered a totally different world, and I didn't have any map. You know,
right.
I had no. You know, there was no GPS. I didn't know what was out there. I didn't know where it was going. I had no cognitive map of how these things operated.
And again, you couldn't come home, talk to your wife about the guy about to shank you, or you can't talk to your peers and your colleagues because you're not supposed to be doing this. I mean, wow.
You know, I had to keep it to myself, and I'm kind of wondering, you know, hey, am I getting psychotic? I mean, am I going crazy?
Right.
I mean, I had to ask myself, and there was nobody to run this past. There was nobody to talk to. If I brought it up to my boss, I'd be fired or labeled a lunatic. You know, the only people who understood were the schizophrenics. You know, when I told them about they do that to me. You know, it was like, yeah, okay, I could talk, but I couldn't talk to anybody normal in the human race. You know, it was very isolating.
Well, it seems to me that all of us seem to have a bit of this psychic parasite in us, giving us these horrible messages and diminishing our spirit. And it seems that those that suffer more trauma, deeper trauma than just the real world provides, you know, molestation and abuse, then the voices seem to be able to come to the front. But from listening to you, I think that there would be a lot of people listening saying, you know what, I got those voices saying this stuff to me.
Yeah, and you know, it's not like psychiatry says. It's not like us and them. You know, they're crazy and we're not. We're all crazy to different degrees. I mean, this is a continuum. You know, we're all humans, and the schizophrenics are at the you know top 10% of the normal curve. But
Right.
but these things attack us all. Now, you know, you might say, oh no, they don't. But if you step back and you go, okay, I'm going to step back and I'm going to watch my thoughts come into my mind, you know, and then you can see them flow in. You're the watcher. You know you're the watcher. You are not the thought. You're watching that thought materialize in your mind, you know. Now, what these things want you to do is jump on it, and once you jump on it and believe it, then it injects its poison in you, and what they want to do is generate negative emotional energy. That's what they feed off of. That's why these voices are always negative and horrible and rotten, you know. So if you jump on that thought and you think it's yours, then you make it yours. And
you're feeding them.
And you're feeding them, and you become what they are telling you are.
Which feeds them even more.
Which feeds them even more.
Astounding. Well, guys, I hope this opens a whole new paradigm for you folks. It really has for me. This concept of taking it from the clinical into the real world and understanding that we have evidence of psychic parasites. We have evidence of material parasites that can take over the mind of creatures. And we have a world that is going into massive disruption right now. And maybe each and every war, maybe every time mankind turns on himself, it is due to these voices.
You know, I have no doubt, because look at the amount of negative energy that is produced in a war. You know,
yes.
The prison itself was a feeding ground for these things. I mean,
yes.
The paranoia, the fear, they want to generate as much fear and upset. That's what they feed off of, you know. So if they can get a war going, all they got to do is, you know, kind of trigger it, and then they sit by and they just feed, they just gorge, you know. And I think a lot of our people, you know, in the deep state are just infested with these things.
I would think so.
They think of nobody except themselves and their own gain, you know, and that's kind of what these things do. Also, they don't give a crap about, you know, the people that they're torturing and destroying their lives. They could care less.
Well, I opened this story with Robert Smith Todd, Abe Lincoln's father-in-law, being a psychotic psychologist, binding people in torturous devices and rolling them around gleefully in this haunted asylum. Well, guys, Jerry gets far more into things that go bump in the night. So this next hour is going to be very fascinating as we start to dig into some of the prescience that these voices seem to have. We'll try to see what throws them into a frenzy. See if we can find the cures and the understandings on the other side. And then let's go ahead and bounce this into the concepts of synchronicity and have a look at how positive forces and positive voices could even be there as well. So I hope you all will come over to freemantv.com and subscribe. I hope you will all let everyone on YouTube know that I'm not on YouTube. I can't upload to YouTube. They have me blocked right now. I'm hoping to not get my third strike and keep going on YouTube, but of course everything will keep going on freemantv.com. And follow me on Twitter at Freeman TV to get all the news stories and thoughts and theories that are going on. For Jerry Marzinsky and his amazing tale, mostly you follow Jerry on Facebook. Jerry, you also have a YouTube channel, correct?
Yeah, I've got a YouTube channel, but I wish I knew how to use it better. I mean, I have several videos on the front, but the others are stuck under the video section, you know, and I don't know how to get them over onto the main page. I wish I knew how to work that thing, but
maybe I could help you, Jerry. I have been at this for 13 years.
Oh, that would be
And
great.
I've had to go through every hoop there is. This is the longest running talk show on YouTube, and it's
Oh,
about to be deleted.
no, that is a shame.
But I can help you with all that stuff. I will. And I'll get you in with Alonzo Pichardo. Maybe we can get you a website and get things going. Just so everybody know, Alonzo doesn't work for free. He wants to get paid for his talents, and it's worth it, honestly. But we can get you set up, Jerry. We'll get you going in this whole situation because, yeah, I mean, you got to have demons in your head to be able to work in the World Wide Web.
Oh man, Sherry and I have been working on a book for years, and it's very slow going. We're trying to get it through a writers group at the university, and it's like they're just not satisfied with anything. So, we've got maybe 6 or 7 chapters finished, but we're working on it.
Fantastic. Well, I hope you folks will go and check out Jerry's work. Give them any details they need to I mean, Facebook, you're Jerry Marzinsky on Facebook. And is that the best place for people to try and find your work?
Well, yeah, Facebook is, it's not the best medium.
No.
But yeah, we try to keep it up to date there. The site is called The Presence of Other Worlds in Schizophrenia. I think that's what we call it.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, I'll get that all linked up for sure.
Yeah, The Presence of Other Worlds in Schizophrenia. And we have a lot of people chiming in saying, yeah, I've experienced these things. This works. Sherry's program works. And they're talking to one another. I've got some stories about patients I worked with who kind of made friends with these things.
Well, that's where I want to go with you next. So, folks, we're going to sign off here because we're just chomping at the bit to get into these stories. I hope you all will come to freemantv.com, subscribe, and get this second hour. It's the only way to sponsor this independent media. As you can see, we're being shut down left and right and everywhere. And pretty soon it's just going to be the website. So, they're corralling us, folks. I hope you'll come along. That's where I'll be, freemantv.com. We'll see you all next week.